My parents thought they had won. Grandma's house was sold. The papers were signed. The money was gone. And everyone in the family believed Grandma had just lost the one thing she loved most. But what none of us knew at the time was that Grandma had seen it coming months earlier. She had smiled through every lie. She had listened to every excuse. And while my parents thought they were making plans behind her back, Grandma was making plans of her own. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and this happened 18 months ago in a small town outside Lexington, Kentucky. Before I tell you how my parents lost everything they thought they'd gained, you need to understand what that house meant, because this was never really about property. It was about family. At least that's what I used to think. The house sat at the end of a gravel road lined with old oak trees, white siding, green shutters, a wraparound porch that creaked in the summer and groaned in the winter. My grandfather built it with his own hands in 1968. Every board, every nail, every window frame. He and Grandma moved in when my mother was 7 years old. My grandfather died when I was 12. Grandma never remarried. She stayed in that house alone for more than 20 years. To owe her. It wasn't real estate. It wasn't an asset. It wasn't an investment. It was her life. Every birthday happened there, every Christmas, every family dinner, every memory. The house held all of it. My parents knew that better than anyone. My mother, Linda, was Grandma's oldest child. My father, Richard, married into the family 35 years ago. Growing up, I believed they were good people, hard-working people. The kind of people who helped neighbors and brought casseroles when someone got sick. Maybe they were, or maybe I only saw what I wanted to see. The first signs appeared after Grandpa's old farmland was sold. That land had been sitting unused for years. When a developer bought it, Grandma received almost $400,000, nothing life-changing by today's standards, but enough to attract attention, especially from people who suddenly started talking about family finances. My parents became very interested in Grandma's future. At first it sounded reasonable. Mom would say things like, "We just want to make sure she's taken care of." Or, "What happens if she gets sick?" Or, "Someone has to help her manage all this." Normal concerns. Responsible concerns. The kind no one questions. Not even me. Looking back, I should have. Because the conversation slowly changed. They became less about Grandma and more about her money. I noticed it during Sunday dinners. Mom would ask questions. How much was in Grandma's savings? Did she still have the investment account? Had she updated her will recently? Who was helping her with taxes? The questions never stopped. Grandma usually laughed them off. "Don't worry about me." That was her favorite answer. Then she'd change the subject. At the time, I thought she didn't notice what was happening. I was wrong. Grandma noticed everything. She just didn't say much. That was one of her gifts. She could sit quietly in a room while everyone else revealed exactly who they were. Things got worse after Dad's business started struggling. He owned a small roofing company. For years it did fine. Then several contracts fell through. Material costs went up. Debt piled up. Stress followed. The pressure changed him. Or maybe it revealed him. Soon Mom and Dad were talking about money all the time. Medical bills, credit cards, loans, retirement. Every conversation somehow led back to finances, and eventually, back to Grandma. One afternoon I stopped by Grandma's house after work. She was sitting on the porch shelling peas, the same way she'd done every summer for decades. I sat beside her. She handed me a bowl without saying a word. We worked quietly for a few minutes. Then she asked something strange. "Claire, if someone only calls when they need something, what does that tell you?" I laughed. "That they're probably about to ask for money." Grandma smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile people make when a joke lands too close to the truth. That's what I figured. I asked what she meant. She shrugged. "Nothing important." Then she changed the subject. I wish I had pushed harder. A few weeks later, Mom announced that she and Dad were helping Grandma with her paperwork again. It sounded reasonable. Grandma was 78. Technology confused her. Legal documents were complicated. Of course, family should help. Right? That was the story everyone heard. But something felt off. Every time I visited, there were new folders on the kitchen table, new forms, new discussions, new signatures needed. Mom always seemed eager to handle everything. Too eager. One evening I arrived unexpectedly. I found my parents sitting with Grandma in the dining room. The moment I walked in, everyone stopped talking. The silence was immediate. Unnatural. Mom quickly gathered some papers. Dad avoided eye contact. Grandma looked directly at me. For a split second, I thought she was trying to tell me something. Then she smiled. Everything resumed. Nobody explained what they'd been discussing. Nobody offered details. I let it go. That was my mistake. Months passed. Then one morning Grandma called me. Her voice sounded different. Tired. Worried. Can you come by after work? I asked what was wrong. She paused, long enough to make me nervous. Then she said, I think your mother wants me to move. I drove there the second I got off work. Grandma was waiting at the kitchen table. A cup of tea sat untouched in front of her. She explained everything. Mom had been pushing her to sell the house. Constantly, every week. Sometimes every day. The argument was always the same. The house was too big, too much maintenance, too dangerous, too expensive. Grandma should move into a retirement community, sell the property, simplify her life. Again, it sounded reasonable. Except for one thing. Grandma didn't want to leave. Not even a little. I still take care of myself. She looked around the kitchen. I still love it here. Then she looked at me. And once I leave, I never come back. The sadness in her voice hit me hard. Because she was right. Nobody moves out of a home like that expecting to return. I told her she shouldn't do anything she didn't want to do. She squeezed my hand. Then she said something that didn't make sense until much later. Good. A pause. I already started preparing. I asked what she meant. She smiled. The conversation ended there. At the time I assumed she meant preparing emotionally. I had no idea how wrong I was. The pressure intensified after that. Mom became relentless. Family gatherings turned into strategy sessions. Dad joined in. Even my younger brother started repeating the same arguments. Everyone suddenly agreed the house needed to be sold. The timing felt coordinated, like they had rehearsed it. Grandma kept resisting. Until one day, she stopped. Just stopped. No arguments. No objections. No discussions. Nothing. She simply told everyone they were right. She agreed to sell. The change shocked me. Even my parents seemed surprised. Within days, everything moved fast. Real estate agents appeared. Photographers, appraisers, inspectors. The house went on the market. A bidding war started almost immediately. The property sold for far more than anyone expected. When the closing happened, Mom and Dad celebrated, actually celebrated. I remember seeing the photos online. Dinner at an expensive restaurant. Champagne glasses. Big smiles. Meanwhile, Grandma sat alone on her porch, watching movers carry boxes. Something about it felt wrong. Terribly wrong. But I couldn't explain why. Then came moving day. The day Grandma officially left the house. I arrived early. The driveway was crowded. Trucks. Family members. Boxes stacked everywhere. Mom was giving orders. Dad was supervising movers. Everyone looked busy. Everyone looked satisfied. Grandma stood quietly near the porch steps, holding a single cardboard box. The last thing she carried out herself. I walked over. Asked if she was okay. She looked at the house. Really looked at it. Like someone memorizing a face. Then she turned to me. And smiled. Not sadly. Not emotionally. Confidently. Like someone who knew a secret. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and made a call. A very short call. Less than 30 seconds. When she hung up, she looked back at the house one final time, then she said, "They think this is over." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" Grandma smiled. The same calm smile she'd worn for months, and said 5 words that changed everything. "No, sweetheart. It's just beginning." For the next 3 days, nothing happened at least. Nothing visible. Grandma moved into a small 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of town. Mom told everyone it was a fresh start. Dad called it practical. My brother called it inevitable. The house was gone. The money had been transferred, and every conversation seemed to end with some version of the same sentence. At least everything worked out. But Grandma never said that. Not once. I visited her on the 4th day. The cottage was neat and comfortable, but it didn't feel like her. The old house had history. This place had beige walls and generic curtains. It looked like a place someone moved into, not a place someone belonged. Grandma was sitting at the kitchen table reading. When I walked in, she smiled, the same calm smile, the same one she'd worn on moving day. I finally asked the question that had been bothering me. "What happened with that phone call?" Grandma looked up from her book. "What phone call?" "The one you made before leaving the house." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she closed the book. "I called my lawyer." My stomach tightened. "Why?" She leaned back. "Because I wanted him to know the sale was complete." That answer somehow created more questions than it solved. I asked what she meant. Grandma smiled again. "You'll find out soon enough." Then she changed the subject. That should have frustrated me. Instead, it made me nervous, because for the first time, I realized something. Grandma wasn't upset. Not really. A woman who had just lost her home should have been grieving. She should have been angry, heartbroken, something. Instead, she seemed strangely relaxed, like someone waiting for a package to arrive. The following week brought another surprise. Mom and Dad started spending money. A lot of it. Dad bought a new truck. Not used. Brand new. Mom booked a luxury cruise she'd been talking about for years. My brother paid off several debts almost overnight. Nobody officially admitted where the money came from. Nobody had to. The timing spoke for itself. At Sunday dinner, Mom couldn't stop smiling. She talked about future plans, future investments, future opportunities. The word future came up so many times it sounded rehearsed. Grandma wasn't there. She had declined the invitation. Mom pretended not to care. But I noticed something. Every time Grandma's name came up, Mom changed the subject. Fast. Too fast. Like she didn't want anyone thinking about her. Then another strange thing happened. About 2 weeks after the sale, I received a call from someone I didn't know. The number was local. The voice belonged to a man named Harold Jensen. I recognized the name immediately. Harold had been Grandpa's best friend. They'd known each other since high school. We talked for a few minutes. Then he asked a question. "Has your grandmother heard from the trust attorney yet?" I froze. "The what attorney?" There was silence. A long silence. "Oh." Harold sounded uncomfortable. Maybe I wasn't supposed to mention that. My heart started racing. "What trust?" Another pause, then he sighed. "Forget I called." He hung up. Just like that. I immediately drove to Grandma's cottage. She answered the door before I knocked, almost as if she knew I was coming. I told her about Harold's phone call. The moment I mentioned the trust attorney, Grandma laughed. Actually laughed, not loudly, just enough to confirm something important. She wasn't surprised, Grandma. She sat down in her favorite chair. "Claire, how much do you trust me?" The question caught me off guard. "Completely." She nodded. "Good." Then she pointed toward the kitchen. "Coffee?" I nearly lost my mind. "Grandma." She smiled. "You'll know soon." That was all she would say. Meanwhile, things were starting to change inside the family. At first it was subtle. Mom and Dad argued more often, small disagreements, nothing major. But the tension was growing. The money wasn't solving problems. It was creating new ones. Dad wanted to invest. Mom wanted to spend. My brother wanted his share immediately. Everyone suddenly had different priorities. Greed has a strange effect on people. It makes them fight over things they don't even have yet. 3 weeks after the sale, the first crack appeared. A certified letter arrived at my parents' house. I know because Mom called me. She sounded furious. Not worried. Not confused. Furious. Can you believe this? She was practically shouting. I asked what happened. Some attorney is claiming there are issues with the property. My pulse quickened. What kind of issues? I don't know. She clearly knew more than she was saying. But it's ridiculous. That night I couldn't sleep. Something was happening. Something connected to that phone call. Something connected to the lawyer. The next morning I visited Grandma again. This time she was baking peach pie. Completely unbothered. I told her about the letter. She didn't even look surprised. Instead she asked, "Did your mother sound angry?" "Very." Grandma nodded. Good. That single word sent chills down my spine. Good, not unfortunate. Not surprising. Good. That afternoon another letter arrived. Then another. Then another. Within days my parents were spending hours on the phone. Meetings were scheduled. Documents were requested. Lawyers became involved. Nobody explained anything clearly. But everyone was stressed. The cruise was cancelled. The new truck stopped feeling exciting. The smiles disappeared. And still, Grandma remained calm. Then everything finally exploded. About a month after the house was sold, my parents were called to a meeting. The buyer was there, the buyer's attorney, several legal representatives, and Grandma's lawyer, a man named Robert Gaines. I'd never met him before, but I'd heard his name twice now. Once from Harold, once from Grandma. When my parents arrived, they expected clarification. Maybe a paperwork issue. Maybe a title discrepancy, something simple. Instead, Robert Gaines opened a folder, a very thick folder, and began explaining what Grandma had done 6 months before the house was ever listed. 6 months earlier, before the first conversation about selling, before the first real estate agent, before anyone suspected a thing, Grandma had quietly created an irrevocable trust. She transferred specific ownership interests, protected key portions of the property, recorded legal declarations, documented concerns about financial pressure, and most importantly, she had created conditions that had to be met before any sale proceeds could be distributed. Conditions nobody bothered to investigate, because everyone assumed Grandma was confused. Everyone assumed she wasn't paying attention. Everyone assumed they were the smartest people in the room. They were wrong. As Robert explained the details, my parents slowly realized something terrifying. The money they thought belonged to them didn't. Most of it never had. The celebration, the spending, the plans, the assumptions, all built on a foundation that legally didn't exist. Mom reportedly turned white. Dad stopped speaking entirely. My brother asked whether the trust could be challenged. That's when Robert smiled. A calm, professional smile. The kind lawyers wear when they know exactly how strong their position is. Then he reached into the folder, pulled out another document, and slid it across the table. A document nobody in my family knew existed. A document signed months before the sale. A document containing one final instruction from Grandma. The moment they read it, the room went completely silent. I didn't learn the full contents of that document until 2 days later. Mom called me at 6:11 in the morning. She never called that early, not unless something was seriously wrong. The moment I answered, I knew something had happened. Her voice sounded different, smaller, for the first time in my life. My mother sounded scared. Claire. A pause. You knew about this, didn't you? I sat up in bed. Knew about what? Another silence. Then she said it. The trust. I looked at the clock. 6:12. Outside, the sun wasn't even up yet. No, I said truthfully, I didn't. Mom let out a shaky breath. She planned everything. Then she hung up. No explanation. No details. Nothing. I called Grandma immediately. She answered on the second ring. Good morning, sweetheart. She sounded cheerful, like she had just finished a pleasant breakfast. What happened? A pause. Then I heard her laugh softly, not cruelly, not maliciously, just knowingly. I suppose Robert showed them the second document. I grabbed my keys. I'll be there in 10 minutes. When I arrived, Grandma was sitting on her porch with a glass of sweet tea, the same calm expression she'd worn for months. I sat down beside her. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally, she looked at me. You want the whole story? I nodded. She took a slow sip of tea. Then she began. 6 months before the house went on the market, she noticed something. Not one thing, 100 little things. Questions about money. Questions about her will. Questions about ownership. Questions that had nothing to do with her happiness and everything to do with her assets. At first she'd ignored it. Then she'd started paying attention. And once she started paying attention, she couldn't stop seeing it. She noticed how often my parents discussed the value of the house, how rarely they asked how she was feeling, how every conversation somehow ended with finances. That's when she scheduled a meeting with Robert Gaines, privately, without telling anyone. She reviewed everything: her estate, her accounts, her property, her legal protections, and together they created a plan. Not to punish anyone, not to trap anyone. To protect herself, because if there was one thing Grandma understood after 78 years of life, it was that money reveals character. Sooner or later. Every time. The trust she created did something very specific. The house could still be sold. The sale could proceed. The paperwork could be signed. Everything could happen exactly as my parents wanted. But the proceeds would remain protected until a separate review process was completed, a review that included independent legal oversight, verification of intent, verification of consent, and one final instruction: the second document, the document Robert revealed during the meeting. I leaned forward. What did it say? Grandma smiled, then she quoted it from memory, almost word for word. If any beneficiary, family member, advisor, or interested party attempts to pressure, manipulate, influence, or financially benefit from the sale of this property against my wishes, their claim shall be revoked immediately. I stared at her. The realization hit me all at once. Mom, Dad, my brother, all of them, gone. Every expectation, every planned payout, every future dollar, gone. Because they had done exactly what the document described. Grandma nodded. They spent 6 months proving me right. The room suddenly felt very quiet. What happened to the money? I asked. Grandma looked toward the horizon. Most of it was transferred into charitable trusts. I blinked. What? She smiled. The Children's Literacy Foundation. Pause. The Veterans Center. Pause. The Local Scholarship Fund. Another pause. And a small portion for family members who never asked me for a single thing. I immediately understood. Not because she said my name, because she didn't. That was Grandma's way. She never announced things. She simply handled them. The following week became chaos. The buyer completed the purchase without issue. The trust remained valid. The legal challenges went nowhere. Robert had anticipated every possible argument, every loophole, every objection. The trust held. Mom was furious. Dad looked exhausted. My brother stopped speaking to almost everyone. For months they'd been making plans for money that was never theirs, and now they had to explain why none of those plans were happening. The new truck was sold. The cruise never happened. Several purchases had to be reversed, debt returned, reality returned, and suddenly, nobody wanted to talk about the house anymore. Then, something unexpected happened. About 3 weeks later, my father showed up alone at Grandma's cottage. No mom, no brother, just dad. Grandma told me about it afterward. He stood on her porch holding a small paper bag from the bakery she loved, blueberry muffins, her favorite. For a long time, neither of them said much. Finally, Dad spoke. Did you know? Grandma nodded. Yes. Another silence. Then Dad asked the question that mattered. Did you think I'd do it too? Grandma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at him for several seconds. Then she said something that apparently made him cry. I knew you wouldn't stop it. When she told me that part later, I understood exactly why it hurt him. Because it was true. Dad hadn't created the plan, but he had allowed it. He had watched it happen, and sometimes that's enough. He stayed for almost 2 hours. When he left, he hugged her. The first real hug they'd shared in years. Mom never came. Not then. Not the following month. Not even after Christmas. Pride can survive things common sense cannot. Eventually, though, even pride gets tired. 5 months later, she called. Not me, Grandma. The conversation lasted 23 minutes. I know because Grandma told me. Most of it was silence. A little crying. A lot of regret. And no excuses. Just regret. For the first time, Mom admitted something she'd spent years avoiding. She hadn't been trying to protect Grandma. She'd been trying to protect herself, her future, her fears, her financial security, and somewhere along the way she'd convinced herself that made it acceptable. Grandma listened. Then she asked one question. Was it worth it? Mom couldn't answer, because there was no answer. Not a truthful one. The house was gone. The money was gone. And the relationships she'd damaged couldn't be repaired with a signature. That spring, Grandma invited the entire family to a barbecue. Everyone came, even Mom. The atmosphere was awkward at first. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew where to start. Then Grandma did what she always did. She made everyone sit down, handed out lemonade, and started talking about literally anything except money, gardening, weather, birds, recipes, life. Normal things. For the first time in years, nobody discussed inheritances. Nobody discussed property. Nobody discussed assets. And somehow that felt like progress. As the evening ended, I sat beside Grandma on the porch, the same way we had hundreds of times before. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. Families laughed in the yard. Children ran through the grass. For a moment, everything felt peaceful again. I looked at her. You knew all along, didn't you? She smiled. I suspected. No, I laughed. You knew. Grandma looked out across the yard. Then she said something I'll never forget. When people think you're old, they stop hiding who they are. I sat quietly, because she was right. Everyone had assumed Grandma wasn't paying attention. Everyone assumed she was vulnerable. Everyone assumed she could be managed. What they failed to realize was that wisdom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it simply waits and watches and prepares. My parents thought they had sold Grandma's house behind her back. What they didn't realize was that Grandma had already protected herself months earlier, not because she wanted revenge, because she wanted the truth. And in the end, the truth did what it always does. It showed everyone exactly who they were, including Grandma, who turned out to be the smartest person in the family all along.